Hello, my loves. Welcome back to an episode of This Life's the Pits. Today, your girl is going to spend a few minutes hanging out with you and chatting about this idea of self-care and self-love. And this is something that I have been working on for many years, and it's a lifelong journey. And some of us think that we can just do a couple things and feel a little bit better, and that's going to get us through indefinitely. And that's just not the case. I am here to break it to you. This is a lifelong adventure. And I think so often we hear in the therapeutic field and in the coaching space to do the work, do the work, do the work. And nobody really talks about what that means to do the work. So I wanted to take the opportunity to talk about this briefly here on a quick pit stop episode of what it means between self-love and self-care, the difference, and also what it means to do the work, right? It's like, well, do the work. What is the work? So let's dive in real quick to how I interpret self-love, self-care. So self-care is doing the work on ourselves consistently over time that allows us to develop self-love. Okay. So I'm going to kind of repeat that because I think it's just super important to recognize the difference that self-love is attained through consistently providing yourself with self-care. All right. And self-care looks different for everybody. So I'm going to go over some tangible things about what self-care looks like for me, but I wanted to at least give you an idea of what do the work means. And do the work means diving in deeper with ourselves, a deeper sense of self, understanding who I am at my core. And how this looks is having hard conversations, not just with other people in your world that you care about or that you come in contact with on the regular basis, but also with yourself. So getting real with yourself on who do I want to be and what does that mean for me, right? Like if I want to go and be a bodybuilder, well, sitting on my ass every night eating Oreos is not going to get me 1% closer to being a bodybuilder, right? I have to be real with myself. Is that an attainable goal? Is that a realistic goal? Is it something I even want? And if it's not, then reevaluate. Where's that coming from? Having the hard conversation with myself, like, maybe I really don't want to be a bodybuilder. Maybe I really like eating Oreos and I just need to monitor that a little bit better so that I can be healthy while still enjoying and indulging, right? Definitely different. So having hard conversations with other people, learning how to have hard conversations, guys, this takes practice. So journaling out with yourself, how you're feeling, what you're thinking, your goals. And if you write out a goal and you're like, that does not light my shit on fire, that does not set my soul on fire, then we really need to evaluate what our goals are, for one, right? And then having hard conversations with other people, this takes practice. Guys, I do this for a living. Day in and day out, I have hard conversations for a living. And therefore, I get a shit ton of practice at this, right? It doesn't make it easier for me to have a hard conversation with my kids or my husband or my parents or my clients. But I have developed the neural pathway in my brain that I know how to do it. And so I can tap into that. It doesn't make it easy, but since I'm consistent with it regularly, it doesn't feel as hard. So there's that. Setting boundaries. So one is having hard conversations. Two is setting boundaries, getting really, really clear on what your boundaries are with other people. I've done a really great episode. You can check on the podcast. I'm not sure exactly what episode it is. Just look back a handful of episodes from this one, and you're going to find on there, it is all about attachment styles and how that relates to building boundaries. So check that out if you're struggling. And again, guys, if you need help with this, you need to hire somebody, whether it's a life coach or a therapist, understanding where you're at in your journey and looking at those options for yourself. Number 3, forgiving yourself. We don't know what we don't know, guys. And so we have to forgive an old version of us while we continue to build and create the new version of who we're becoming. 4, we have to forgive others. This one's a really fucking hard one. I'm not going to lie. A lot of times we build resentment and anger because we are not only not forgiving ourselves for who we were in that process, but also we struggle to forgive other people of who they were back in that process. So just understanding that we can achieve forgiving ourselves and we can achieve for forgiving others. And again, these are tools that if you're not able to tap into, get the help to do it. And lastly, create. Go create something, whether that means you just journal and write out and nobody ever has to see it, or you take time to go draw and be artistic, or you create a really, really great those little ones just interrupted. I apologize, but such is life, y'all. So creating. Sometimes I just really get inspired and create a vision board around the things that I want to achieve in the next month, 6 months, year. Sometimes I get just really like, okay, I want to create a new routine for myself or a new workout routine, or I want to create a really awesome meal tonight for my family, right? Like creativity can mean anything. It can mean anything and everything. But explore that about yourself. Go create something, put it out into the world, even if it's for nobody else but yourself. So again, how we go from doing self-care to creating self-love through the consistency of self-care is having hard conversations, setting boundaries, forgiving yourself, forgiving others, and creating. So those 5 things are going to be the foundation of your self-care. Okay. Now, self-care looks different for everybody. What's self-care for you is going to be different than for me. So I'm going to quick give you a rundown of what my routine, my daily self-care routine, my non-negotiables. There's only a few, guys. There's really only a few. And they interchange day to week to month to year, well, season, I guess you should call it, where I integrate extras. But my everyday go-to is I have a gratitude practice. Okay. So every single day, I look at the things in my life that have occurred in the last 24 hours and really evaluate. And it doesn't mean that we have to get super bougie with this. You can write it down in the notes app on your phone. You can text it to yourself. You can write it in a, literally going to show you. This is my gratitude work, right? Like in a spiral notebook that I have for myself. It sits along with my to-do list every day. That is it. It's not bougie. It's not special. It's super easy. I write down a few things a day, or I just sit with myself in my moment of silence of like, what has happened in the last 24 hours that is unique to me. So it's one of those things where if we don't really evaluate the specialty of each day, we get caught in the monotony of just living, of just existing. We're not really exploring and living into our best version of ourselves. So number 1, a gratitude practice, or at the very least, a practice of sitting with just what has happened in the last 24 hours that is different and unique to me. The second thing is every day I typically wake up a little early, earlier than the rest of my household, so I can have some coffee and do this practice so that I can sit with myself and just have a few minutes of really evaluating what's the last 24 hours brought to me. And then lastly, the third thing, these are the 3 non-negotiables in my life, right? The third thing is I move my body, and it looks different every day. Some days, let's see, guys, if I can get through these next 2 minutes without, the minions wreaking havoc in life. But if you know, you know. So lastly is a movement routine for me. So every single day, some days this looks like me full throttle running a few miles, up to 6 miles typically, but usually only a few. And lifting weights, it might look like a half hour to an hour and a half of movement intentionally. And some days it's me just sitting watching a movie and stretching. for 15, 20 minutes, stretching my body, kind of doing some yoga moves, which I am not by any means a yogi. I wish I could be. It is just not in my nature. It is not something, every year I'm like, oh, I want to get into yoga this year because I know it will be good for me. It's just not something that I have achieved at this point in my life. So with that said, to recap, intentional movement. Okay. Intentional movement. So if you go on a walk with your dog today, great. Is it intentional? Are you going out on this walk with the intention of, this is my movement break? I'm really going to dive in to making sure my body is just engaged with the movement. And if that's just an extra for you, then be sure to build in 15 minutes to a half hour of movement every day. And I know everybody's body is different. Everybody's threshold of ability is different. Some people can't ambulate, some people cannot be able to run or work out. Do what you can. Do what you can. If stretching feels good to you, do that every day. But the purpose is doing it with intention. The intention behind, I'm moving my body to release the static energy that is being held within. Okay. So again, those 3 things are my non-negotiables. They don't have to be yours, but those are mine. So it's getting up a few minutes early. It's having a couple sips of coffee while I'm sitting and doing my gratitude. So I'm kind of killing 2 birds with 1 stone. If I'm really just evaluating what was the last 24 hours like, what are some things that I need to pivot and turn for today to be a better day? Or what are some things that went so well yesterday that I want to replicate today? And lastly, movement. Intentional movement. So those are the things that I do every single day for self-care, every single day. And over time, that has compounded to really love myself. Like, I don't miss a beat with those things. I just don't, because those are the things I know that I need to love on myself, to create this open space to let love in. And it's funny because people have said just in these last couple of years, like, you've changed. I love how you love on yourself. And it's like, yeah. And some people will, it used to bother me. Oh, do I love myself too much? Am I too much? That's not the thing. Let's not get it twisted. There's not enough of self-love in this world. And my goal, if there's one thing I leave in this lifetime, it is to teach my kids how to love themselves through the hard, through the times when we're not our best self, when I'm screaming like a banshee woman, and I give myself grace and I have a hard conversation with them about how I apologize for my behavior, right? And I teach them that I'm still human, I'm still enough, I'm still worthy, even though I have my faults and I have my moments, because I love myself. And this is a practice, you guys. This is something we have to intentionally work through the neural pathways in our brain to practice this. So self-care is a daily practice that you do every single day in and day out. Can be 1 thing, can be 2 things, can be as many things as you want. But making sure we have at least 1 or 2 non-negotiable things that we're doing to practice self-care every day. So we start to lean into this ability for self-love. And then over time, you can add things, right? Got my hair done. Covered up those grays for those of you that are here on the visual part of life on my YouTube channel here. You can see my hair is darker, doesn't have no grays no more. So that is something that I do every couple months, every few months, right? And that's an added self-care. It's not every day, but it's something I do to take care of me, to feel good and to feel fresh, to feel rejuvenated, to feel into myself, right? And other things, like maybe once in a while, I go out with some friends and enjoy a night out to dinner, or I go and get a massage every once in a while, or a facial every once in a while, right? These are things that are added things here and there that just boost up that self-care, right? But again, those 3 things remain the same every day, every day, every day. That, my friend, is doing the work. So when we say do the work, it means figure out what for you means self-care, and then consistently do that day in and day out. And over time, it compounds to a level of self-love that no matter what other people say, no matter what your faults are, no matter the things that you have done that need tweaking or that weren't your best self, you can still rise above that and know that you love yourself enough to process it, pivot, and move through it. So I hope this was helpful. I know that this was a lot of stuff I just threw at you guys, but I think the self-love and self-care aspect is so freaking important. I think it is different. I think self-care is something we have to do every day, and we have to develop the strength and the muscle memory to do that. And if you're not sure how, I can't say this enough, get the help. Hire somebody either in the coaching side of it. If you feel like you're at a level where you've done some of this work and you know the things you need to do, but you're struggling to be consistent and you've really identified what works for you, but you're struggling on the consistency side, a coach is really great for that aspect. But if you're still kind of sitting in this space where you're like, I don't even know who I am, I'm really just living in this existence where I'm kind of treading water in these patterns of life and I don't know how to get out of this, that might be a therapeutic piece where you go and hire a counselor or therapist. So really understand that there are both entities. There are some like myself that kind of intertwine both and have the ability to have this therapeutic counseling aspect or this therapeutic coaching aspect, which is a beautiful thing. So go find somebody to help navigate that for you if you're really feeling stuck. I cannot say this enough. I have done so much work on myself. I have done so much consistent work and I love so hard on myself. I still have a therapist. I still have a coach. That's how much I believe that we can constantly be growing into that next version. And that I know that there's more for me to be able to dive into, that I know that even though I love so hard on myself, that there are things that I can do just a millimeter shift different, just 1% different. And that's where my coach comes into play. And every single time I talk to her, every single time I meet with her, every single time we vox her back and forth, she's sharing information with me that is life altering, game changing. So don't underestimate the work you can do on yourself when having somebody else in your corner. And don't underestimate either the work that you've already done to get here. Because if you're listening to this, it means this is something that's important to you. And if you're still here right now, that means that this touched you in some kind of way. So with that, guys, I'm going to release you into the wild. Of course, I am always rooting for you and love you guys. Go set the world on fire.